So here we are, ladies and gentlemen.
Hang on, let me finish.
I'm doing my intro bit here.
Yeah, I'm finished speaking now, have I?
Who's the professional? Who's the professional?
Let me finish. You didn't let me finish the end of that story, and that is why you should never give Martin Wallace a raw vegetable at Christmas.
And it completely disappeared.
Anyway,
ladies and gentlemen, here we are again. Surprise Stare, part 2. Yesterday, we learned about how Alan and Tony in their youthful days fell in love with each other and almost eloped to Gretna Green, but for the love of a pair of women kept them in England. We learned about Magic the Gathering, and we learned about how Alan Paull had the 1980s replete with board game stardom. But here we are into part 2, where everything goes wrong when he shackles himself to the fine English game designer Tony Boydell. And I would like to say that anyone's watching this, if you have questions, please save them till the end. If they're questions that are talking about kind of the overarching sort of feelings towards Surprise Stare games, they're probably going to get covered tomorrow or Sunday. So we probably won't answer those sort of things. We had a question yesterday saying any regrets. That will be covered on Sunday. But if you've got any specific questions like what Martin Wallace did with root vegetables, then please feel free to put them in the chat. So to begin, you will see that we have a third person rather than a third wheel, something to support and buffet our greatness. And this is the long-suffering wife of Alan, Charlie Paull. Charlie, welcome to the stream.
Hello.
So first of all, who are you? What is your function in Surprise Stare games, and what is your life as a gamer?
Well, I am Charlie Paull, wife of Alan Paull, also known as Charles Paull.
Are you Paul
Charlie?
Well,
Charlie short for, actually? Is it Charlotte?
It's Charlie.
Okay.
It's Charlie.
Charlene, actually. Charlene,
yeah.
Charmaine, yes.
Yes, we were Alan Charles Paull in the White Dwarf
publication. We wrote a scenario for D&D, didn't we?
Yeah, back in the
got it published, and
they put Alan and Charles Paull, which is a bit annoying in a lot of ways, because
people thought we were brothers.
Yeah, several people actually at Games Workshop knew who we were, but they still managed to get the name. Anyway, sorry, Charlie.
They said they didn't want to be informal.
Right. Well, that makes sense. It makes sense. If you're talking about orcs, I mean, it's the height of formality.
Exactly. That's what I thought. Yes. So yes, I am published as Charles Paull.
Yes, published gamer.
Yeah.
What was your route into games? Were you a gamer before you met Alan, or was it Alan your route into?
Alan was very definitely my route into games. My family didn't play games when I was young. We had half a game of Monopoly once every Christmas because my mum and dad absolutely believed that a game of Monopoly wasn't there to be finished. The idea was to play it for a while and then put it away.
I agree with them too.
Yeah, and so we did that once every Christmas. My mum played bridge wrong, but apart from that, there was no other gaming in my family when I was young. I was once given a copy of Careers, and I played that by myself for a while, which is a bit of a sad way to play Careers, if the truth be told. But no, I first met Alan when I joined the D&D group that they had at King's College.
And so was it love at first sight across a dungeon map?
I don't know. Yeah, it probably was pretty much. That was the first thing.
That was the second time we met.
The first time that Alan ever took me out, we went to a restaurant, and we were in this restaurant, and we were talking about what we've been doing recently. And Alan proclaimed that he was a hobbit, and one of the things he'd been doing recently was climbing a magical statue. And some of the things that had happened while he'd been climbing this magical statue were absolutely fascinating stuff that he felt it was absolutely essential to tell me.
Sure.
And I was kind of going, "You what?"
I tried to put her off. I tried to put her off, you see.
And then basically I said, "I have to do that. That looks fun."
And the thing is, they say nerds can't get chicks, and this is an obvious.
No, his opening line was how he'd been going out climbing magical statues, and I thought that sounded like a great idea myself.
Well, one of our first dates was going to see wizards.
Yeah,
Ralph Bakshi's Wizards.
Yeah, it was
highly romantic, you know.
No, it suited us, but romantic it is not. Ralph Bakshi's Wizards.
So we're doing this. The reason this is happening is because, you know, we have this dreadful virus that keeps us away from each other's society. And so we are not currently in the Ruhrgebiet in Germany. As I said before, I'm a lot less hungover today than I would have been had Essen actually been going on. And so I'd like to talk about, you know, all of your relationships with Essen, not just the Surprise Dare Games, but attendees of Essen, how you feel that it's changed over the years, what it was like back then, and how you feel about those changes. And does the progression of Essen feel like the progression of games in general? So Tony, what was the first year that you went? Was Surprise Dare Games the excuse for you to go to Essen?
Well, it wasn't so much the excuse, because I didn't know it existed until about 3 months before we went, I seem to recall. And so we booked a stand and we went along, and it was 2001, I think, was our first year. And we had no idea what to expect at all. We had 1,000 copies of Copper Twaddle, and we thought that we would probably sell that because we were told there was 100,000 people go to it. And we thought, well, you know, that's if a tenth of the people buy a copy, you know, even at 1% buy I can't even do my maths, buy a copy, then that'll be fine. So we'll be okay. We'll make all our money back, and then we'll come home happy with pockets full of cash. We also didn't know that you had to buy carpet just for the show. At the end of the day, we'd rip it off the floor and throw it away, and that would be it. We had to have wall coverings. So we spent a bit of money on the flooring, lovely green carpet, I seem to recall. We rented tables and chairs, and then Charlie did loads of work doing sort of fake curtains with goblet and motifs stenciled all over them.
Hand-printed goblet motifs on curtains.
Yeah. It looked a bit. So we had tablecloth, medieval stuff. We had medieval helmet and gauntlets and all sorts of stuff. And then we set up. We were proudly setting this up on the Wednesday, and then the breeze turned up. R&D Games, key flower, key whatever, and proceeded to push a whole bunch of computer monitor boxes into the corner of his stand, slap up a bit of old wallpaper paste and lining paper, and write in big marker pen, Cathedral, €30.
R&D game.
You here, R&D Games, and that was it. And we thought, hang on, we've just spent an entire
biro. Yeah.
3 months of preparation, hand sewing the curtains straight off the back of the sheet, you know, off the fabric of the animals. And Richard just turned up shoving these boxes and just a couple of old pasting tables, and that was it. And that was
I assume he sold out a cathedral in 5 minutes and then spent the rest of the time walking about.
He had queues. They blocked the front of our stand so nobody could get us. And the queues, we were next door to him, and they went, they'd completely blocked the front. About four stands down, all the queues waiting to get his game from there. And we were kind of going, anybody want to see us, please? We're standing here in the middle. You could look at ours on the way by. Hello.
And so
extra hours not looking at our stand.
we're used to Essen being this big glitzy thing with the Asmodee stage and very beautiful presenters. I was stood next to one of the presenters last year at the convention, and he was gorgeous. And, you know, the big stands and the razzmatazz. What was Essen like in 2001? Did it still have that feeling of size and glitz, or was it a lot smaller, and was it far less international in its outlook?
It was a lot smaller, and it was a lot less international. I mean, it was primarily Germans. There was a smattering. It was international because there were occasional, you know, French people or Italians, there as well, often looking a bit lost, to be honest.
Yeah.
But it was mainly Germans, There are very few English actually. It was like, whoa, you're from the United Kingdom. Wow.
Wow. Yes,
Yeah.
that was a big surprise.
Yeah, we ended up having, what we found out quickly was that we would design the game's presentation to include German elements as part of the basic elements. So if game needed rules, we would automatically be putting a German rule book in. For Bloody Legacy, we actually
was dual language.
German and the English card names on the same cards, because it was very important to us, or it seemed to us very, very much then, that because the Germans were such a big part of Essen, that we had to make sure that it was accessible to Germans, that we didn't have to go and produce a specific German version. It would have to be compatible, straight out of the box. And as a small company, we couldn't afford to produce 1,000 French and 1,000 German and 1,000 English. So yeah, it was very much that feeling of, it's the Germans first, and then there were the Italians and French, maybe. Then there was a smattering of English folks around the place, and a few Americans would wander over just to see what they could do, the Rio Grandes of the world, to try and pick up stuff to take back. I mean, this was before Z-Man started,
Right.
and all those kinds of relationships and Stronghold and all those guys, all those players weren't around then. So
Copper's model, we had separate German rules that people could pick up German rules, and even a separate German play aid, which we printed out.
The thing I particularly noticed, though, was that after the show, in the hotels around Essen, nowadays there are some hotels you can go in and you won't hear a voice that isn't English, whereas then it was rare to hear somebody speaking English at all. And so when you wanted to go play games with people after the show in the hotels, all of the people that you played with were going to be non-English speakers. And we had some fabulous times. I remember trying to learn a game that only had German rules with myself, a Portuguese person, and 2 Norwegians. And they had doubtful English. None of us had an awful lot of German. And between us, we managed to work out how the rules worked. And it was one of the big camaraderie things of early Essen years, with that whole completely international thing going on. Whereas now, I can spend the whole time and not speak to anybody who doesn't speak English if I wanted to.
Also, be quite segmented, don't they now? They seem to, then you'd be in the Ibis Hotel and it would be literally all nationalities would be there. You'd be able to play games with all sorts of different people. Now people tend to go in blocks. So the Ibis would have 25 people who've all come over from France as a block. And certainly somewhere like what's the big hotel next to the Messe?
The Atlantic.
The Atlantic. That's really very much like all the Asmodee guys are there, all the BGQ guys are there. So there's less of that person.
People who can afford it, isn't it? People who can afford the Atlantic.
Yeah. Well, we remember, of course, when that was all fields, literally.
Right.
Across there, part of the
Yeah, we used to walk that way from the car park. Yeah.
No, walk round it. God.
Yeah. It's very annoying when they started putting building works there.
And so you're talking about being, one of the few British people and people being surprised. Why did you feel that it was necessary to take SSG to Essen then?
Because there was nothing else like it in the UK.
There was no con in the UK at that time?
Not at all. The biggest things were Magic the Gathering events, and nobody that went to those was at all interested in anything else except Magic the Gathering.
We did go to one, didn't we? We took.
I remember trying to demo Boydell to a group of people, and they were not interested.
We had these spectacular comments of people saying, "Oh, I don't know about this game. It seems a bit complicated." And you're thinking, we're in the middle of a Magic the Gathering tournament. Just saying this card game is too complicated.
Yeah, it was. The thing is, you only have to go to Essen once, and then you realise quite how special it is. Even back then, even though it was half the size in terms of the attendees and a third the size of in terms of exhibitors, it was something utterly remarkable. I'd never seen anything like it in my life. I think probably the closest analogy was when we went on a school trip in 1980 to the motor show in Birmingham.
The NEC,
and Ferraris and cars that you'd never have seen in real life, at that time. And so going to Essen, it was like Christmas for people.
Very much so.
Like Christmas multiple times, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, you talked about yesterday, you mentioned sort of hanging out with John Bohr and Martin Wallace and stuff. Was there that sort of feeling? Were you mixing with those kinds of people afterwards because you were basically forced into one area where you could actually speak to people?
Yeah, well, board game renown was different then. I mean, people knew Rainer Knizia, and I think Klaus, the guy that designed Carcassonne, was becoming quite famous because of Carcassonne.
Right.
And then you had the classics, the Settlers and all those guys. But it was really, board game celebrity was a very, very rarefied thing. So Martin Wallace was only just about the new age of Steam, and before that, he was very much an eclectic taste. People who loved his work, but most people didn't know much about it.
Yeah.
And so it's what we've noticed over the years is how the focus has changed somewhat. Certainly, it was difficult for us to get in with publishers, even get to meetings with them, because you weren't a named designer. It didn't have a pedigree behind you.
I think
it was quite perfectly reasonable to go and talk to Martin. Martin's never had any kind of delusions of grandeur. He doesn't swan about the place. He's just happy to talk to people. He wanders confusedly about the place on many occasions. He doesn't know where he is most of the time, but that's just Martin.
I think the star designers were all German. Really,
Yeah.
there were very few
The Martin Wallace
non-German star designers.
The Martin Wallace thing was hilarious though, because for about the first 4 years that I knew Martin Wallace, every time that I met him, somebody would introduce us and say, "Hello, this is Alan's wife, never Charlie, and this is Martin Wallace. Have you met Martin Wallace?" And I'd go, "Yes, I've known him for about 3 or 4 years." And the next person that would see us together would go, "Hey, look, this is Alan's wife. Have you seen Martin Wallace before? This is amazing. Let me introduce you to him."
I've interviewed Rainer Knizia now, I think 4 times. And literally every time I went up to him. And so he did a full episode of my show. We spent an hour together. We had 20 emails arranging the appointment. He chose 5 games. He sent me a biography. And I went to interview him about 6 months later. And I said, "Oh, do you remember that show you did where you chose the 5 games to take the apocalypse?" Completely no idea. Every time I've interviewed him, he has no idea who I am. It's insane. So, what have been, would you say, the major changes in Essen? I mean, obviously size is one thing, but what are the major changes you've seen over the last 20 years of Essen?
Well, I think that I was thinking about what happened in the early days and as it was building up, and I do remember that it was getting much busier after the first couple of times. It was getting much busier. I remember we couldn't find a space to play, and I think we had Pueblo, an older game, nice 3D game, and we actually sat down on the floor because there weren't tables. And we had like 4 or 5 of us sitting down on the floor playing Pueblo because it was so packed. Now, it's not. I mean, it does get very packed on Saturdays nowadays, but that was exceptional. That was showing that it was getting much more successful and much bigger. I think that because we were stuck on a stand most of the time, you don't get the full impression of that, of the whole of the Essen experience when you're in one place. But certainly the size is just massive, and it getting bigger every year was a striking thing that I found.
It's noticeable if you look at it academically that is true. But my personal reaction is that the first year I was so wowed by the size of the whole thing. That's the biggest it's ever been in my head.
Right.
Because after that, I've got used to it. Yeah. And now it's just, well, you go through there and you get to such and such a thing. And yeah, that kind of stands usually over there, but they're in this format this year. So, it's a very matter of fact, yes, I know the whole place now. Whereas then it was oh, wow, this is incredible. It's surprising how you can get used to something that is not only so amazing, but also changing all the time.
I think the international bit is the way it has changed hugely. That there's so many more companies.
I mean, I went, I think, the first time in 2012, and I was really surprised that there were almost no Americans there. There was no Fantasy Flight Games, all of that sort of stuff. And I think that's a big change. The Americans have really sort of come over the Atlantic, right?
Well, Board Game Geeks started turning up, didn't they, in about 2010, 2009? Because I think I remember doing a demo of Fuzzed to Doug. Hi, Doug. Doug is on the screen again.
Oh,
and Totemo the following year, we did the video presentations for those. And I think BGG turning up really, it was good for BGG to get themselves a bit more known in Europe, because they weren't the kind of the first place people would go in Europe. But that certainly brought a lot of people along with them, I think. A lot of people who hadn't maybe thought of going, kind of realizing that there was a lot more going on than they might have realized before. Because if you think about it, if you were looking at Essen in the early 2000s, what was there in 2008, 2009 was very much different. Many more exhibitors, many more games, much more accessible stuff. Just multilingual as well, not just German or English. So it became much more inviting. And I think BGG did a lot in pushing what was going on. And that brought people in because they realized it was no longer this German show. It was actually a proper international show. Yeah, I think that's the way it kind of began to expand.
And especially with the internet, a huge expansion of very in-your-face press coverage. I mean, in terms of, well, I mean, obviously reviewers and bloggers and other people who are in one way or another blagging their way into the Wednesday. Some people would do that. So, but huge, massive press presence from all over the place, really. I think extremely noticeable.
The thing that really punched that one home for me was the time when I was trying to explain a game. And the person I was explaining it to wasn't following my English. It was obviously not their first language. And so I had been used to the fact that if they didn't speak English, then obviously you tried to do something in German. And I have schoolgirl German. It's not great, but I can give an impression of something in German to somebody. So I said, you know, I'm sorry, obviously not understanding English. Can I explain it to you in German? And they said, no, I'm from Brazil.
Where's your Portuguese, Charlie?
I think also very quickly the bigger companies latched on to the marketing of Essen themselves as well. So it wasn't just the media, it was the companies themselves that began saying, we're launching this at Essen Spiel. And promos started appearing in very large quantities. And this began the sort of the fear of missing out sort of experience that players and attendees began to get. It all became a bit like the internet and Magic the Gathering that we were talking about yesterday, about how they sort of conspired to be happening at the same time, and so they benefited. I think that Spiel benefited very much from the wider public publicity, and everybody in Belgium and Netherlands realized that actually they were only 90 minutes away, and actually it was well worth going along for the weekend after all, rather than thinking that they would find it intimidating or too small or not enough to entice them in the first place. It became very quickly the place to go to.
And so as publishers, how is Essen to deal with in terms of organization, in terms of money, in terms of the way they treat you, and especially in comparison to other cons?
Well, I kind of leave that to Alan to explain, because he did all the organizing, basically.
It's not bad. It's pretty good. I think it's run by Dominic Metzler, and it's not run by a large company. That's not run by a games company. It's run by an enthusiast, a games enthusiast who is now professionally just running this massive con, and that's just kind of grown up over the years.
A bit like UK Games Expo, really.
Yes, yeah. So it's professionally run, but by people who know about small companies and large companies. Now, obviously, they're going to an extent, pay quite a lot of attention to the big players, but they've always had this thing. They want to attract smaller games companies, so they have special deals for the small size stands, and that's really helpful for a company like us, so we can get a good deal in terms of footfall for the area. It's actually very, very cost effective to do that, and they are very responsive. They have good staff. I've never really had any difficulties with the organisation. It's always, from our point of view, been really, really easy. And you can hire furniture. If you have any special requirements, you can ask them about it. You know, it's very easy. I mean, it's, should I say? Yeah, it's bureaucratically German in the sense that you must have all the paperwork there. That's fine. But if you have a problem, they are very helpful in resolving problems, which can be quite different from other cons. And that's really good. They are familiar because they've got so many companies involved. They've probably had all the problems you can possibly think of, so they know how to resolve problems. So they're really good. It's a pleasure to work.
And if you were put on the spot, do you prefer the slightly weirder, smaller, more intimate Essen, or do you like the big bombastic thing that it's become?
I love it all. I have fond memories of the earlier days, but a bit like Charlie, once you've been to the first one, you don't really notice the 200,000 people versus the 100,000 people. It's still crowded. You still have to queue to get to the loo. It's still difficult to get a bagel at 11 o'clock because everyone's queuing up for a coffee and a bagel. So you kind of learn all the shortcuts, but it doesn't.
Yeah, by the time you've been there 10 or 12 times, you know which loos are going to have the shortest cuts and which ones you can get to easily.
Yeah, for example, you know, if you need to go from one hall to another hall, it's best to go outside.
Yeah.
We find ourselves as a small company picking up on those deals, being put in the halls with other small companies, which is exactly the place you want to be. It used to be hall 9 back in the early days. Then it was hall 4, a sort of a whirlpool washing area of the hall where you'd arrive there and then you'd be on your way back out again. You know, it's kind of the turning point, the snake effect there. And then in recent years, it's been hall 7, which is where all, you know, Japan brand are. It's right next to the hall with BGG. It's where all indies are. And that's where you want to be, actually, because that's where everybody wants to go to first. Because if you want if you want Maracaibo, well, you can either get it online before the show now, which is what happens now, a lot of the big releases, or you can spend an hour or two in the smaller hall and get something that no one else has picked up yet. Yeah. And by the time the buzzers picked up on it by days 2 and 3, the small company's sold out, but you've got yourself a nice bit of.
And why Mondrian was never picked up by a bigger publisher, I'll never understand.
I keep doing that. Ben introduced me to this game, Mondrian, the dice game, which is a wonderful thing. I did try and sell it to Hub Games actually recently. Try to get them to do a reprint because it is a tremendous thing. But yes, that's the only way you find the small games is to go to the smaller halls. They're not the last. They used to be, hall 7 used to be the last hope hall because the Mesa sort of opened it, but it was right on the edge of something and nothing. So people would often walk past the entrance to hall 7. This was about 2009, 2010. And nobody thought there was anything happening in there because it was so bare. There's only a third room. And they've got better at organizing things so that everywhere looks busy all the time, which is what you want. Because there were companies who paid the same as us to have a stand who saw maybe a tenth of the footprint.
Yeah.
Everybody
did.
The
very first year, I remember us commenting on the tumbleweed going down the aisle in front of us because we ended up with a place a bit like that. So it was absolutely.
The guys who did Fantasy Pub.
We were
Ornella.
Fantasy Pub,
Ultramare and lots of other really good games.
They sold out at Fantasy Pub.
Pub sold out after 2 days. Basically, day one, people bought it, played it in their restaurants and pubs Thursday night. Friday, everybody enjoyed it so much they came back and bought the last of their stock. So Emmanuel was packing up his tables and walking off halfway through day 2 of his first Essen.
Yeah,
Christ, what you want.
We didn't want that. We were miserable. We had bloody boxes and boxes of stuff behind us. We had 2.5 days to go, mate.
And so that's a wonderful segue to take us back to that first Essen then. You know, you had Copper Twaddle. So Copper Twaddle was Tony's design, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
And why had you decided that Copper Twaddle was going to be the one that you were going to debut at the world's biggest board game show with?
Well, that was largely because, to an extent, because that's what we had. I mean, I wasn't really, I didn't know anything ready, to be honest, at that point, because we've both been doing Magic and I hadn't been designing stuff. And Copper Twaddle was there, and it was good. I mean, I think that the main reason we did it was we thought it was a good game. We played it a lot. It was ready, and we thought, well, why not? And I suppose to an extent, it was a relatively low risk way of going to Essen. In that we weren't paying a huge amount of money to do a big box game or something like that. We were going with a card. I mean, it had its own little problems.
The rule book not telling you how many cards you started with. That was a
we were on a learning trajectory, i.e. we were making lots of mistakes.
Yes.
You have to do. You have to do.
Bless you.
COVID me.
And so when I interviewed Tony for my show, you talked about the first game, which would have been Copper Twaddle, I assume, that you had issues with the publishing, the actual printing of the game. You went to the wrong company. What was that?
Oh well, yeah.
We thought the way you got games published was to use a publisher rather than a games publisher. Now, we didn't know that Cartamundi existed, even though I'd spent at that point 5 years of my life and quite a lot of money playing a card game printed by Cartamundi in Belgium. We didn't know it existed, so we went the long way around, didn't we, Alan?
So we actually used a printing company that I had used before, I think, on something else. But they were not a specialist card manufacturer. And so we used them, and it meant that although the actual print quality was high, the actual the material was high quality, the cards were not exactly the same size. I mean, it was close, but they were not as pristine the same size as you would get in a properly manufactured playing card deck, and that's something we were learning about. We were learning about how to print and publish games themselves, and were there any? I don't think there were any actual start to finish games printers, games manufacturers, or certainly weren't any that we knew of. And we were trying to do it in the UK as well, and the UK gaming market was
zero,
tiny, almost zero. The
answer is we paid far too much, and actually we were very lucky that it didn't kill the company.
I was quite happy to pay quite a lot for production. We paid a lot for the artwork, we paid a lot for the print, but I think as a first game you have to have something which is a quality product, and we managed to achieve that. We had it in although it was one deck of cards, we had it in a double size cardboard, proper card box, rigid box. And I think it was a pretty good little package, actually.
That's very good.
The thing we had a real problem with, because it was the very first Essen we'd ever been to, and we should have gone to Spiel as punters first. We should have gone as players, not as manufacturers. We didn't do that. So it meant that we were setting the price for the game completely in the dark. We didn't know what the prices at Essen would be like. So we set it at what we thought was a really...
In hindsight, €500 was a bit daft for a card game.
Especially as the euro wasn't actually in then.
Yeah.
or maybe that was the year the euro came in.
I can't remember what the actual price was. Anyway, it was far too high, and I think we halved it, didn't we, on day 2 or something?
Something like that.
We weren't really pissed off everybody who bought it on day 1.
Something like that.
And that was another lesson.
But also, we hadn't marketed the game. We considered Essen, being at Essen, to be the marketing of the game. That's how you do it. People walk past and they see your stand and they come and see it and they love the game and they buy it. And that's how we thought it worked. So we had no idea about how to do the marketing before Essen. And that's why being next door to Richard Breese was such a major boom for us, because he was able to.
Well, apart from the fact that his crowd stopped people from seeing.
Apart from that, yeah.
So I mean, what were the marketing avenues at that time? Because this is the nascent world of the internet. I guess BGG had just started, but you certainly didn't have YouTube or any of that. How would you market a game approaching a con like that?
Good question.
Didn't turn up. I assumed, as I said before, if 100,000 people turn up, surely 1,000 people will pay €15 for a copy of a card game. Surely they will. It should be easy, like selling.
Prayer, man. Well, I think. I mean, Richard did. I think Richard Breese. The lesson we have from Richard Breese, he had a very strong track record, because he'd been to Essen since the 80s.
Since it started, it was 12 or 15 years or something. He'd already been going at that.
So the reason he had loads and loads of customers was people knew who he was and had bought his games previously, and that's the way. And in a way, that's what we've done over the last 20 years. We've built up a strong fan base, I suppose. People who will come and see what we've got and wonder why the hell are we doing that this year, that kind of stuff, and they'll buy it, which is great. And it's having a customer base of people who know who you are, and sometimes at Essen where you are, which can help. So having the same stand location can really help too.
And so how did you do that first Essen? Was it a complete disaster?
Oh, financially, it was a terrible affair. I mean, I'm looking at it from I was always looking at it from a financial point of view, really.
We did sell several copies of the game.
We made the cost of the show back. We didn't make the cost of printing Copper Toddle back, but I think we made the cost of the show. The odd thing was the following year, when we did Bloody Legacy, I was much more depressed about our performance. But I think you pointed out to me on the ferry on the way back, Alan, that we'd sold something like 700 out of our 1,000 copies of that game.
Yes.
And it was much more of a success, even though it seemed to me that there were far fewer people stopping and buying it. It's such a weird thing. You just can't really, you need the space after Essen to kind of sit back. If you're certainly in those early years to try and work out whether it was a success or not. Because
do you think that first year it's just a matter of someone comes to the stand and buys the game and you go, bloody hell, someone has come to the stand and bought our game?
And one set of people came to the stand dressed in fabulous medieval gear and sat there playing the game, making the stand look even more medieval than it had done before.
They actually
and they went away and they came back and said, shall we sit here and do it again later on?
They were on the stand for about 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
As a part of our medieval scenery.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely brilliant.
And they went away and they came back again the next day and did it again.
Well, I suppose
just random people we'd never met before. They just liked the game and they wanted the medieval environment to sit in.
Having convenient chairs is also helpful.
Convenient chairs is
otherwise
never a bad thing.
Standing for a long time.
And so so you had Copper Twaddle, you had Essen. What was the impulse to carry on? Because it wasn't a wild success. What made you say, okay, we'll carry on with this. We'll come to Essen next year. We'll get another game next year.
It was just so exciting. It was just so astonishing. We'd never seen anything like it, and there were so many people there. It was like, this is obviously where you have to be.
It's a drug.
But as a small company, you have to be there to sell games. Well, that was our view, because we knew that we weren't very good at marketing. So basically, what we were trying to do was work out what our best routes to market were going to be for people who aren't really good at kind of advertising and marketing theory, if you like. And so UK Games Expo later on and Essen Spiel were the main routes that we were going to meet our audience. And I think part of what our realization was for this type of game, you have to be able to show people the game. You have to be able to demo the game. And that is what persuades people to buy it. And it's not until they know you really well that they will just buy without looking at it.
So that's one thing. I mean, I was joking about the 1,000 copies and 100,000 attendees, but it's really very difficult to sell a game to people. Most people that come to your booth, even last year, will want to sit down and try a game, and quite a lot will just get up and go on again and not. Buy. It's not a guarantee. It doesn't matter who you are or what you're selling. It's never a guarantee. And we learned so many lessons by going through the pain to some extent, but we were comfortable enough in our sort of financial lives to be able to give it another go
right.
We felt comfortable that we could do it, and always we wanted to kind of make sure we weren't overreaching ourselves. So when we did Bloody Legacy, I did all the line art and Charlie did all the publishing and pre-publishing work on that, all the colouring in. I joke about it being colouring in, but it was an awful lot of work that she had to do on that. And I think it might be good to hear, because at those early years, we really couldn't have carried on without each of us sort of fixing into a particular role to get us through the delivery of that next product. And Charlie was really, really important in that, because the cost of getting someone else to do the artwork and the layout would have killed us. It would have been utterly prohibitive.
So what were you doing? What was your role at that point then, Charlie?
Well, as Tony was saying, basically I was doing visual presentation of what they were doing of their games. You were saying that what was our reason for going again? personally, I had two reasons for going again. One was before we went the first time, I said I didn't want to do retail. It's something I had never wanted to do. And they said, come and sell these games we've designed. And I went, look, I'll design your stand for you. I'll set up the curtains. I'll make the whole place nice. Stuff. I may not ever sit and explain one of these games to anyone. I may not never take any money for it. This isn't what I do. Right. By the time I'd done it once, I was so taken with it. It was just a complete drug, because you show somebody something and they go, what the heck is that? And you show it to them and they love it and you love it, and you can share your love of something, and then they give you money for it, walk off. And it's just, it's amazing. It's such a drug that it was something I never thought I would like at all, but they persuaded me to go and do it. And I just, in that environment where there's so many people and everybody wants you to show them something wonderful, and you've got something wonderful and you can get them involved in it, and it's just amazing. And the other reason was Richard Breese, because we had met Richard and we'd kind of said, you just did all that crowd and stuff and you speak English, and how did you do that and why did you do that? And he basically said, yeah, we live down, half an hour down the road from you. And then we started play testing and designing together, and and then he let us share his stand with him when we came into Bloody Legacy, and he completely took us under his wing. And if it hadn't been for Richard Breese, I don't know whether we would have gone back again. I don't know whether we would have afforded it or whatever.
That was one of those really major pieces of serendipity. We happened to be in the stand next to Richard Breese. It was that's an amazing piece of luck, really.
Or the Germans who were setting it up thought two English people would put them next to each other. I don't know, but yes, I do artwork. I do layout work. I do some drawings, but I do some colorings. I do layout work and making things presentable, and the kind of publishing work. If you're given like a pile of words and a pile of pictures, and you have to put the whole lot together and make it into something, that's the kind of stuff that I do.
And were you trained in that? Was that your profession, or was it something you just sort of fell into and found that you had an aptitude for?
No, I'm a biologist. I did biology at university. I didn't do anything like that. No, I just kind of fell into it.
And so how? I mean, when I think, if someone said to me, "Oh, do a load of graphic design on this card game," I mean, I clearly wouldn't be able to do it. How did you manage to pull it off?
Well, art was always my thing. When I was at school, my two loves were science and art. And my family all said, well, you can't possibly get a job in art. There are no jobs in art.
That's still true.
You absolutely can't be an artist. So, follow up with the science. So I was a girl and I did science, and obviously that's what girls do in the 1970s. So I got no work at all. And so I kind of did the thing that I loved, which was the art. And I didn't do it for any kind of recompense. It's always been just a hobby. And then I found out I could do things with it on computers, and I could mess with it and make something useful out of it. And although I wouldn't say I was employed exactly, because I think you have to get money if you're employed.
That's well, I mean, not anymore. Not with the Tory government.
In this,
don't tell the boss.
There are jobs in this stuff, after all.
But now Charlie's got a nice high-tech tablet for her computer, so now she can do it.
Now I actually have Photoshop and things.
Now we don't need,
and all the things that make it easy.
Now we don't need Charlie to work for SSG because we have other people to. Now she's got a tablet.
Yeah, we were very lucky in that the team had all the necessary elements to be able to produce a board game within the team. That I did, for the games. I mean, when we did Bloody Legacy, the cartoony artwork was something I was quite happy to do. Charlie had all the skills she needed to lay out everything and get it to the printers. Alan has the project management experience. We all fell in love with Essen immediately. It was love at first sight. So we all had no problem in dragging ourselves away from our friends and family for a week. Even at that time, at our own cost, we were paying to be there. Surprise Stare couldn't pay for us to be there. It was all just there. Yeah, it was. We were very lucky. There are a lot of companies that couldn't have survived if they didn't have an artist. If they had to employ an artist every time, it would have been too expensive for them. So yeah, I think there was that bit as well. We were all willing to muck in and get on with it. We all believed in the vision of Surprise Stare.
Yeah, yeah.
And so Bloody Legacy, did you go to Carta Mundi this time? Did you get the correct printing this time?
We
Who was it who printed it? I can't remember who printed it.
it was a card game manufacturer.
Yeah.
God, I can't remember who we went to. Yes, it was. We got a proper thing for it. The interesting thing about Bloody Legacy, and going back to what Tony said earlier about not realizing what the situation was, we went to Essen with Bloody Legacy. Bloody Legacy is a small game. It takes 2 minutes to explain the rules, and it takes 5-10 minutes for some groups to play. It's very easy to take it on the stand and sell it. Copper Twaddle, you have to have people sit down and play it for half an hour or whatever, or an hour, and then they might or might not buy. With Bloody Legacy, it's so much easier because it's such a small game, and it just looks great. It's got all that humour in it. It's in your face. That's the whole point of Bloody Legacy. It's very much in your face card game. It's a last man standing card game. It's much easier to sell, and that's why it was flying off the shelves to an extent.
And Bloody Legacy was a continuation of a comic you'd written, Tony. That's right. Am I correct in thinking that?
Yes, sort of. Yeah, I mean, you've played the Black Overcoat game.
Yeah.
With the Boydell family. Black Overcoat was a cartoon character I did in my university days, Polytechnic days, and shortly afterwards. And I tried many times to get a game around it, but it was too complicated a board game. And Bloody Legacy was the ultimate distillation of that. So it's set in the universe of my cartoon, but it just boils away all the nonsense, and it's just about the stupid jokes. So you have shark-infested duvets and doorway guillotines and insane gardeners, and it's all very silly and very cartoony, sort of itchy and scratchy feel to the violence. And it really began some of the more to showcase our sense of humor more, which is not a way to sell a card game or any game really in Germany at a show like that.
For sure.
Humor is such a thing that doesn't travel very well across borders. So, but for those that played it, they loved it. They loved the humor. They loved the weird pictures and the strange machines and the whole idea that last man standing literally meant last man physically standing, and everyone else had been chopped to bits.
But also, to be fair, we had a very good translator for the German. So we had a native German speaker who did the translating, and she translated it. So she translated the humour into proper. So it wasn't transliterating English. She was actually using proper German jokes to support the artwork, and that was very, very important there. So we pay quite a lot of attention to that. And actually, we said about marketing
we asked
earlier.
her to do translating duck with a picture of a duck, and it was supposed to mean duck and cover.
Yeah,
right.
It was the joke, was the fact that there was a picture of the duck there, and to translate something like that was just that's not a pun in German.
Right.
So she translated it as schnell und tauschen, I believe, which is dive that you get with the submarines.
Yeah.
Which is
with a picture of a duck.
Yeah, with a picture of a duck.
Ducks dive.
Exactly. It was. She did some really clever things with trying to do that combination of pictorial and word puns. One
thing I should have mentioned on the marketing side, although I said we don't do marketing, but we did have a website, and for Copper Twaddle, which was the thing we missed out. For Copper Twaddle, we went to town on the website. So Copper Twaddle, each card in Copper Twaddle had its own backstory, and we illustrated this on the website, and we wrote a whole range of spoof articles about Copper Twaddle, because I can't remember the exact details, but Copper Twaddle is an ancient, it's a medieval game, and it was like the 21st folio of this game. It's got massive history back hundreds of years, invented by Geoffrey of Monmouth or something.
Yeah.
So I even wrote a couple of learned academic articles on it, one of which included a notation for Copper Twaddle, like you would do for a bridge notation or whatever. So we went to town on it in that sense, and that
We had
was,
that big puzzle
that was
game.
nice. And we had a big, we had a big
I learned
puzzle.
how to build websites to do that.
Yeah, but got a hidden message and a hidden code, and you can decipher the secret message within the game. Sort of based on my love of things like Masquerade and the Golden Egg Hunt from their 1980s. Yeah, Copper Toll was a lot of fun. Actually, I got contacted by the guys at BBC. They made a series with Adam Hart Driver, who used to do these history programs for children, mainly family-based history programs. And they said, could you tell us about this medieval card game? Because Adam's doing this episode about recreation in the Middle Ages. And I said, I couldn't even for a second.
Oh, that is a crying shame.
I would love to have just.
That is a crying shame that you didn't.
I know it would have been wonderful, wouldn't it? But yeah, and I think, although I did the Spiel podcast, the American guy who did the Spiel.
Yeah.
They thought it was a real game for ages, and they broadcast this episode reviewing it, saying how they loved it and how it was based on a real game, and they really went to town on how much they admired that we brought this game from the history back into life again. And then I sent him an email saying it's all fake, mate, and then he had to apologise. That was very, very funny. But Bloody Legacy really brought Charlie's web skills into play, because I said, let's have a house that you can wander around. Let's have a puzzle like we did in Copper Twaddle, but let's have it hidden around this fictional house. So you can actually, like a point and click adventure, move through the house, decipher the clues.
Sorry, Charlie's got a little bit of a dental.
So, when you sent me the notes over for this, you said today we talk about Bloody Legacy, we talk about Copper Twaddle, we've spoken about Essen, but you also put Nuremberg and that snowstorm. Now, I have no idea what this is. What is the legendary Nuremberger snowstorm?
I'm going to let Charlie tell us the story, because Alan was warm and comfortable all the way through this.
Yeah, Nuremberg is Nuremberg, for people who don't know, Nuremberg is the big toy fair, primarily toys and games, but primarily a toy fair in Nuremberg, Germany. It's international trade fair. It's not for players. It's for trade, and it's massive. I mean, it dwarfs Essen Spiel. It's an absolutely huge affair. I mean, it's like I think it's probably larger than the NEC. I don't know. It's massive. I mean, it's sufficiently large that they run permanent kind of buses going from the car park to the show. It's really vast, because it's toys, international toys.
It's way bigger than Spiel.
Way bigger than Spiel. It's 10 times but the market for toys is 10 times the size of games at least. So it's a big affair, and it happens every year in end of January, February. Yeah. For some reason, they think that's a good time of year to hold a massive international trade fair, when the weather is obviously going to be perfect every time. We went. It's a place you go where you've got more time to meet with publishers. So if you're a designer or a small company like us, you can go there, and it's much more relaxed than Spiel, because they're not having to fight with customers all the time.
Yeah.
You can sit down for half an hour, and actually talk to people about your game and chew the fat and all that. So it's a really good thing to go to for budding designers and for older designers too. And so we've been, I think, a couple of times, and we decided to go.
And then we had the snowstorm.
Decided to go again in 2009. Yeah.
And Alan had been at work in London during the day, had caught the train up to where we decided to spend the night in Stevenage.
This was
in order to get the train to Stansted the following morning.
Sorry?
This was 2003, I think, this one. This year. It was very early 2000s. But yes, you were in London, you went up to Stevenage. We were supposed to meet and then fly out to Stansted.
Yeah, we were supposed to be meeting Alan in Stevenage, spending the night in the hotel in Stevenage, and getting a really early plane first thing on the next morning from Stansted. And Tony and I were over in Gloucestershire. And so I said I would drive us over to Stevenage that evening in the car. And we reckon it usually took about 2 hours to get to Reading, and then about another 2 hours, maybe less than that, maybe an hour to get to Stevenage. And so we got going, and it took us about 2 hours to get to Reading, and it had been getting worse and worse weather as we were going. It took us 13 hours to get from there to Stevenage.
Well, to be fair, it took me 3 hours.
No, Alan, you don't get to Charlie was driving and we were stuck on the M25. What happened was basically the temperature dropped enormously, very, very quickly. And the roads iced up. And then just as soon as they'd iced up, the snow fell and covered the ice. This meant that the M25, almost all the way round, was an ice rink with snow on top of it.
And all the other motorways nearby as well.
It meant that any time there was a slight incline on the M25 or the M11, the motorways, any lorries that were halfway up would start sliding back down again. So there were enormous blockages.
My favourite one was somebody had got a rescue truck, and they'd got a car up onto the back of a rescue truck, and the rescue truck was pointing uphill, but its front end was heavier than its back end, and it was just gently rotating.
At one point, we were stuck in the same place just outside Stevenage, waiting to go into one of the tunnels there.
Yeah.
And I got out of the car and wandered over to the other side of the motorway because there was nothing coming down the other side. It was completely blocked off, and there was about 2 feet of snow on that side. And I stood there in the silence.
But it was on top of 6 inches of sheet ice.
And you couldn't hear anything because obviously that's what snow does. Snow tends to deaden all the sound around you. And I could see across this line of cars. And so we didn't get to Stevenage in the hotel until 6:30 in the morning, and we had to be out of there by 8:30. So we had an hour's sleep. Alan sort of sleepily woke up and went, "Well, I've had a good night's sleep actually." So well, you can fucking drive then. And, drove us over to Stansted, but the flights had all been delayed. The airfield was terrible, and there was lots and lots of delays. But luckily,
the M11, and that was still gridlocked from the night before.
So we snuck across countryside, but Charlie had the foresight to ring Stansted in advance. We basically pre-booked on a flight that would get us out later that day. But it was a catalogue of woe because Stansted was heaving with people who were stuck. We didn't fly out of there till 9 o'clock at night that night. We didn't arrive eventually into Nuremberg until 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. And then we had to wait an hour for a taxi. So we rocked up at the German hotel at 4:30.
Oh boy, and what a taxi. My God.
Oh yeah.
That was the worst taxi drive ever.
No, he knows how to drive in snow. I mean, they had snow in Germany as well, but they know how to deal with it. We have one evening of snow in the UK.
Driving around the centre of a city at God knows what o'clock in the morning at like 80 miles an hour.
Yeah, well, in the UK, you have one dump of snow and everybody goes absolutely useless for 3 days. In Germany, it's like, it's just snow. Put your foot down.
Yeah.
You know, they got snow tires. They know what to do. So yeah, basically we ended up our first day at that Nuremberg, 9 o'clock in the morning, drinking coffee after coffee after coffee, because Charlie and I had about 3 hours sleep total since Thursday, and this was Saturday morning. And we were exhausted because of the snow. But we did have a reward, didn't we, Charlie, in the evening? Do you remember?
Mexican in Erlangen.
Moroccan
in Erlangen. Oh, they were the best restaurant I have ever been to.
It was two doors down from where we're staying, which we didn't know at the time we put the hotel. Two doors down from where we're staying was the best Moroccan restaurant that we've ever.
I've never encountered a better one.
Unfortunately, I think it's closed.
Yeah.
Before several years
they
ago.
served us an enormous plate of carbohydrates and meat. And I think I slept for 14 hours that night.
And I mean, you were lucky though, being in Nuremberg during the snow is a wonderful thing. No, it's a beautiful place. When the snow was falling.
The most beautiful thing, like sort of 4 o'clock in the morning with the street lights on, and the whole place completely littered with cars whose batteries have gone out because they've all tried to just stay there and keep their heater on or whatever, and not going anywhere. And like there was this littering of cars everywhere. There was like one wiggly route that you could more or less take along the motorway in between all the broken down vehicles, and the trees were all completely outlined in white and shimmering, and the whole thing was just and Tony was snoring his head off in the passengers. But it was that was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. It really was completely.
I am quite a sight when I'm snoring, to be fair. It is very beautiful.
Very beautiful.
I noticed that
We played a game of Arboretum where you fell asleep, and it was a beautiful sight.
I noticed that we have a guest who has arrived in our.
Well, he is German, so if he was late, I'd have been very disappointed.
Shall we invite our special guest to join us?
We let him in.
Or should we leave him out in the cold, icy snow? No, let's let him in.
Well, that seems to be your MO.
Yeah.
Alan. So.
Yeah.
I mean,
Here he is. Hello.
Guten Tag, Daniel. Wie geht's dir?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I hear you too. I checked this out. It's a bit better, I guess, with this because of echo stuff and so on. And yeah, great to see you. It's almost like Essen here. It's almost, yeah, because I always drop by when I come to Essen. I drop by at the Surprise Stair Games booth. And Tony will never recognize me. He just plays his games with people, and I drop by and I have to disturb her, and you see, well, do something before his eyes. And hey, Tony, it's me. He says, yeah, my second favorite German.
You're my third favorite German. Sorry.
So you see.
So yesterday he said you were the third favorite German. I think we all need to know who the top two are now.
Well, number 2 is Matthias Nage, because he is just the world.
Oh yeah, well.
He is gorgeous and lovely, and the best German that I know is Uli Blennemann. I'm afraid.
I think that's rather overselling Uli, but there we are.
To be fair,
Yeah,
I've not got blind drunk with Daniel, and I'm pretty sure
I will not compete with these guys. I met them a lot, of course. I was at the Mallorca event with the Klickenabend people.
I keep hearing about this Mallorca event.
With Uli Blennemann and Matthias Nage. Matthias Nage, actually, he published a game from me. So we were very close too. And Uli Blennemann is one of my favorite Germans too. So
I think he's quite the most appalling person I've ever met.
He's a punk rock ice hockey fan, crazy guy. I guess privately he's completely normal, but if he goes into the scene, he's kind of, I don't know. Oh, Bez, hi Bez, how are you? So everything's fine here. And the first excuse, I did that when I had a conversation with Bez this Monday. I did the same excuse in the beginning. It can be that I asked back several times because I'm not that fluent in English, listening to people who can, you all talk to each other in your...
Wenn du willst, Daniel, wir können auf Deutsch.
What?
Ich glaube, das alles auf Deutsch sprechen, so ist gar kein Problem.
No, oh, fine. No, I just say it in advance, so if I have to do this, it's not so embarrassing,
So anyway, we have you here, and I'm sure a lot of people are thinking, who the hell is this guy? Why has he gate crashed the stream? So tell us who you are and what connection you have to this illustrious board game publisher. Yeah,
well, many people know, that's why I changed my name down there, or in brackets, I said Duchamp, because Duchamp was for a very long time kind of my name on Board Game Geek. I am Duchamp, and I'm there active since 2005, I guess. I did a lot of photography stuff. I run a photo competition especially for Essen at Board Game Geek. Before Board Game Geek, they had this video stuff and all these things. I just ran a competition. I said, hey, show off your great photography from Essen so people can see what's going on there. It was quite nice for a couple of years. And I met these guys here, I guess, for the first time in 2007 or 8. I'm not quite sure. And I contacted Alan because I was interested in Tony. What did you do? Because I was interested in Confucius in this game because of the theme, and I contacted him. I found this somewhere on Board Game Geek. I don't know how. And I wrote him an email. I said, "Hi, Alan. I'm Daniel, and my wife is a sinologist, and I'm quite into the theme a little bit. I think, well, maybe I can help you a little bit with German, or I don't know. Let's just contact." And he wrote back and said, "Yeah, we have a translation already, but I can send it to you, so you check it out." And I read it, and It was perfectly German. It was great text. It was so well written, but it was not a game rule at all. It didn't make sense. You couldn't play the game. You just didn't understand what to do, because a translator was a professional translator, but I guess she never played anything else. I don't know, maybe Pachisi in her childhood or so. She had no idea. So all these special game terms like resolving something or whatever, she completely failed. So I wrote back to Ellen and said, well, yeah, very nice, but I think I could do something about it. And I did. I did a complete new translation, more or less. I really rewrote without any contract, without any money. It was just it seemed like a good game to me. And I said, well, how about I just do it? And maybe you give me a copy of the game. It was the very beginning. And if you go to my webpage, gametranslator.de, I do game translations since then. That was the very first beginning for me to go into this business. And now I did over 100 translations, and I'm really one of the, well, without, was the perfect thing.
Blowing your own trumpet.
Yeah, well,
You do that as well.
I mean, if
Yeah.
I could, if I could, I wouldn't leave the house. But
it's just that I'm pretty well known in the scene right now, and I did translation of Pandemic Legacy Part 1 and Splendor and the new Brass from the Roxley people and so on. So I did a lot of games, and huge games, large games. The last thing was Detective, City of Angels, all this dialogue stuff I did for thousands of euros. And back then I just get a copy of the game. But it really evolved since then.
I think Daniel is an example of how Essen lets you meet wonderful people. That Essen and Confucius was an opportunity to meet with Daniel, somebody who's very dear to us. And there are so many people like Daniel that we've met, like yourself, Ben. We've met through this sort of this organization. I'm saying this because I've been told to say it, apparently. It's what it's all about. And for us, the sales figures and all that nonsense don't really matter fundamentally at the end of the day. We go back to Essen because we love physically being there and being with our friends. And what's hurting most this year is that we can't have a bit of fun face-to-face with Daniel, or give hugs to our pals who've travelled halfway across the world to say hello, or share a whiskey with the marvellous Ian O'Toole, or any of those things that we've gotten so used to doing over the years that we're suddenly deprived of. And I think Daniel is a classic example of how board games have brought us all together and introduced us to people that we would never have had a chance to meet otherwise. So it's a pleasure.
Yeah. Well, this year it's really like it makes no sense. This Spiel.digital, I see what it is for many people. It doesn't work for me at all. I'm here at Sunday evening when we have our but it's just, for me, it's meeting people. It's meeting new people, to learn new people, and to get contact to people I've never seen before. That's great, that you contact people you don't know, and you meet people again, for over 10 years, and to meet these people you first met a year ago, and you meet again, and you have these conversations with 5 people who will never meet in this combination, but you have a great, it's just spontaneous, and it's great. I don't buy games at Essen. I take the pile of games I translated. I get all the copies from the games I translate. Then I have 10 copies to get back at home, so it's enough. I don't buy games at all, and I don't need. You see, it's just this. Yeah. Then I translated 2 more games for them, Totemo and Fzt. I did the translation then in 2009 and 10, I guess. And then, we shared the booth. When my first game came out, I did it by self-publishing, via crowdfunding. And I was looking for a booth at Essen. It's very expensive. So I asked these guys, maybe we could share a little bit. And they said, oh, this year it could be done because we don't have a proper game on our own. It was 2013. It was the first Snowdonia expansion, but it was only a small expansion and not a proper game. So they said, well, we can share a little bit. So we have a third of the small booth to present our Steam Noir Revolution game. And it was fantastic. It's all this contacting and doing things for each other.
Yeah, it started for us with
Charlie.
Sharon.
Hi, we didn't hug. Let's hug. Charlie, come on. Let's do our Essen hug here. Oh. Yeah, I can feel you. Yeah, it's we have to do that. Excuse me.
But yeah, it started with Richard offering to share a stand with us, and then we ended up sharing a stand with other people, and it's a good way to share the love.
Well, we have been quite sharing as a company. Surprise Stare, I mean, Alan and Charlie have hosted the Surprise Stare designer days, the designer weekends indeed, since about 2004, I think, when Tara was first being playtested. It's been a long time. And we've been quite happy to share all of our experience with other designers and other companies.
And then with us.
And then with us. And just there are some people who are now doing really well, who kind of didn't have that focus before. And it's quite nice to think that we've helped a few people on the way in the way that we were helped ourselves, giving back some of the love that we were given in the first place. We're not selfish about it at all. And there was a point where we had a sort of a British stand in 2008 with Confucius, but we'll leave that story for tomorrow, I think.
That's where we met. That's where you met when you shared with Martin Wallace and all these other British guys.
Yeah.
And then you decided, well, we better have one on our own.
Yeah, that's tomorrow's story.
Okay.
And so, Daniel, would you put your entry into the board game world as a translator, all the money you've earned, is it down to Charlie, Alan, and Tony?
Well,
where's their share?
Good question. Kind of. No. What seriously? What it really was? They back then in 2006 or 7, I was first time at Essen or something. I was really looking, and I didn't know that many people, and I was really kind of shy and didn't know what to do and where is everybody. But these people gave me some confidence too. They said, "Hey, that's great work," and so I felt more like, okay, it's kind of, they are really nice people, and I get more and more into that. No, I have this. I have almost all Surprise Stare games, I guess.
Tony,
and I have scanned the room too. But it was kind of, it was really to see, okay, it works. So I did some other translations for strange people I've never seen before, and I met later on. They became friends and so on. And then in the years later, I translated the Lemon Brother games, the Fragor games. I translated five years in a row for them. And I had, with the Gen X game people from Madrid, I was very close and translated a lot of games. And then came Asmodee in 2012 and said, hey, we've seen your translations for the Fragor games, and we like the humor in it and the style, and how about working a bit for us? And then I translated for Asmodee. I did a couple of years each month a game, more or less. So it was really and then it was really flowing. And it was really, Nations was the first game I got more than €1,000 for one translation, because I said, seriously, it is just 400 cards. I have to do some research historically and so on. It's not only translate the words, but to really get into it. And you are right that they have kind of, you should negotiate with me about 1.5% after taxes or something.
I think your point, Daniel, that you mentioned about the fact that when you saw the Confucius rules initially, they weren't rules. They were kind of just lists of things, and how you turned them into things that gamers could interpret and make use of and turn into the playing of a proper game, the way that Alan designed it. And I think it's taken, even you're talking about 2006, 2007 doing that work. Even now, it's a struggle to convince quite a lot of publishers who should know bloody better to get a decent sodding rule book sorted.
Yeah.
And in English, let alone in any other language. So All power to your arm on this one, Daniel.
Yeah, well, you are completely right. I had this conversation with Bess on Monday after 2 hours only about translating work. And it was really, it is, I am the first guy as a translator. You're one of the first people reading the rules without knowing the game. You see, all the editors and the game designer, they design the rules in the game, they change and they do whatever they do. But well, they have some blind testing, but mostly not enough blind testing with the final rules. So I get this text, and I'm the most important thing is the first reading. I always print them out on paper and have a red pen, and I go them through as with a blank mind. You know, I just read them sentence by sentence. As soon as I don't understand something or I have something what I just do a mark, because roots should not do this. You know, use vocabulary explained later. No, you have to explain them first. You have to explain, and you have to do it. You know, many rules are not consistent. They use different words for the same thing, and so on. It's just because the designers, well, they know everything. So, and even editors, and I change a lot, and I ask questions. I ask a bunch of questions, always a list of questions, the first thing they get from me. And I said, okay, I need the email address from the designer, from the editor, and so on. And then I get a list of questions. How is that meant? Is this the same as this? What is the material? And so on. And I need as much material as I get. All the graphics, everything. So I see the illustration, I see the style, I see what's going on. And Tony is absolutely right. I mean, the rules, I think the overall quality is getting better in the last 10 years. I got really rules in 2010 or something that I really thought, no, please don't do this. And right now it's kind of, you know, they are online. Most of the time they have some editors online, some people who read them first and so on, and get some feedback, because all this internet thing is going more and more. And I have a team sometimes with brass. I made a first translation, and then I had 10 people or so. They wrote to Roxley via Kickstarter and said, we were interested to read the German rules back. So we proofread them, and I contacted them, and I had 3 times 3 people to read the rules, do some feedback. I integrated their feedback, and the next 3 people got these rules. And so it was really, and they all knew the game already from Martin Wallace, but it was a really great proofreading loop. So this was done really on a professional level. It's rare, of course, but sometimes I ask people, German people, to read them or whatever. But it's right that you say, Tony, it's really, it should be even really great big publishers. Sometimes they just fail.
The difficulty is, of course, as a publisher, and I know this from my own experience, is that you have to allow enough time for this, and publishers rarely allow enough time for doing the rules properly. Now, I found that we with our latest one, which I have been plugging this session, March Programming Voyages, because we were working with. Thank you. Look at that. Completely unprompted. Yes.
Yes.
Right.
I have the German ones.
Yeah.
I didn't translate them.
2 tomatoes and frosted games, which meant that my rules and the rules that Dave Mortimer and I did for Programming Voyages, which in terms of the English, we had a lot of iterations of the rules, not just with us, but with people like Paul Grogan and others who were looking at the game from the perspective of trying to understand it. Working with Frosted Games and with 2 Tomatoes, it meant that we were getting a lot of feedback from people who were trying to translate the game. So that force, I mean, we've had this before, that forces us to look at it from the point of view almost of international English rather than UK English. And that's really, really helpful, because then you suddenly find, oh, we've used this really idiosyncratic word which a UK English speaker would know quite well, but which American possibly wouldn't understand at all, or would get the wrong end of the stick about it.
And I
And
remember,
that really, really, really helps.
I remember some conversations that I've had at Essen, though, with people. I mean, you get 2 or 3 people whose English is not their first language, but they have a variety of different first languages. And you'll be talking with them maybe in a hotel after the show, or maybe on the floor or something, and they'll say, "Why don't you use easier words?" You know, what? And I say, "Okay, well, which English words are the easier words?" And they will all know, because they've learned international English, and they will all be speaking the same language. I'm speaking a completely different language. I'm speaking English, which is not international English, and it's not American English. And I don't know. Whereas with American English, I recognize a lot of the words in American English, and I could translate between the two quite comfortably a lot of the time. International English, I've never learned. I actually seriously thought of going to a teaching English as a foreign language class to learn the English, which was the international English. So I'd find out which ones were the easy words.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, what I do, for instance, I can only translate probably from English, okay? But with a Spanish publisher, or a publisher from Hong Kong, or a publisher from Canada with French original roots or whatever, or from France, or the Asmodee roots, I always say, okay, give me your English translation you already have, but give me the original too, of course. I can read a little French. I can, you know, just to recheck if there are any questions, I can really check back the French text. And with the Spanish, no, with Italian, I even sent the English rules back to some people I know, and I said, please check the English rules. They don't seem to make sense to me, and check back what you think about that. And I gave them part of the fee I got, you know, of the money I earned, I gave to this guy, and I said, you get €100 from my €600 for checking the English rule, to check with the publisher, and to get back to me what about the English rule, so I have a better English translation to translate into German from, you know, because sometimes you have English rules made by some Spanish guy, and you look and you say, wow, that's not really English. I don't know what to make about that.
I mean, what do you think? So I often find when I play games, and I have an option of a German rulebook and an English rulebook. Obviously, I'll read the English rulebook first, but sometimes there'll be a point of order, and there'll be an argument, and I'll say, okay, I'll read the German version, and I often find the German version is actually very clear. That it's very clear on what you should do, and the English version is debatable, is vague. Do you think for that kind of technical writing, for that sort of clarification, German is simply a better language, or is it just bad rule writing?
What we do when we translate is not only to translate the prose, just the text. What we do is to localize the game. Yeah. What does that mean? We have a special target group, and for if you have a kind of expert game, we have German gamers. And German gamers are rule lawyers. They are. So I always add a lot of half sentences or additions to especially French rules, because the German would say, "What's that? That's not clear." So I always clarify. I have to clarify, and I have to add some things. And I ask the designers. I ask French designers. Well, you say, for instance, so you pick up a card from a pile. You just you pick up a card, look at it, and place it in front of you. Okay. Now face up or face down.
Yeah.
In France, the designer says, well, it depends. You just do what you want. It doesn't matter. But in German, every gamer would say, this is not a complete rule. I have to know if I have to do it face up or face down. And if it doesn't matter, if it's my choice, it has to be in the rule. Then there has to be a sentence like, put it up, put it in front of you, either face up or face down, bracket, your choice.
This is
In France,
Daniel,
they don't care.
Wonderful,
It's not in the rule. It's okay. You do it whatever you want.
there is a wonderful game that's played in the UK, and it's done at schools really well, actually, where you have a teacher who has butter, a knife, some bread and some jam, a jar of jam, and a plate. And you get the children to describe the specific order that the teacher should make the jam sandwich. And the teacher will literally do what they are told to do. And they will interpret everything at exactly the face value that it's presented to them. And it's hilarious. And if any publisher should challenge the way that anybody translates their rules, run this exercise with them, because they will then realize how damn important it is to say face up or face down, because your game experience, if you're not supposed to know what your opponent's got and it doesn't say face up or face down, half the games are played, people know what you've got, half the games they don't. And the game experience results 50% people hate the game, 50% love it.
Right. That's
why face down. Why do you know what I'm doing?
That's why
one year, a friend of ours bought a game while we were at Essen, and we were trying to play it in the evening. Yes. And it had been transliterated from the Japanese.
Yep.
And the instruction was
awful.
Face up on the table in front of yourself.
You kind of knew what they meant, which was the interesting thing. It was transliterated, but
but that's not good enough. That's not good enough.
There were very few people who were prepared to lie face up on the table in front of themselves.
I mean, to be fair though, that what Daniel has said there explains a lot of why, for example, the rules for Ming Voyages and March of Progress in German are different in wording from the English versions. They are. I mean, stylistically different, and well, I would say more verbose, but then that's just because I'm approaching it from the English point of view. Things that I considered to be completely clear, my counterpart at Frosted Games didn't think it was clear enough for the German audience, and therefore clarified things in a way where I thought, well, actually, you've clarified this. But the fact that you've clarified it raises more questions. If you haven't bothered with that sentence, it's absolutely clear in the sentence as originally written. So there's a discussion about that kind of aspect. But having the feedback from that kind of thing is really helpful. It does feed back into the English rules, and I did change the English rules in some cases as a result of feedback from that process. That's really very, very helpful.
Yeah, well. Even Martin Wallace changed his game rules because of my questions, and he said, "Okay, I have to do this in English too." Because, well, Martin Wallace has awful rules anyway.
Well, no. To be fair, Daniel, if you went to Martin and said, "Right, I've done this. You need to give me 10% of your revenue on this game," he probably would sign up for that straight off.
When we met at Essen after I translated a game of his, he really thanked me a lot for the work on this game. He was really thankful. He said, "Wow, you did a great job." I mean, it's what I always try to get, but mostly I don't. But I always try is to get a prototype. Yeah. Mostly, if the game is not published at all, it's hard to get a prototype, of course, because there are only some. When I worked with Asmodee, these people were living at Stuttgart, where I also live, so they gave me a prototype of some games. For instance, Spirium by William Attia. Spirium, I got the prototype from him, from the Asmodee people. And this is great because you have the first reading of the rule book and you have the components. And you do, as Tony says, you do exactly what they say. You put the board in the middle of the table, okay, and what's going on. And then you realize where you have spare components, it's not explained what to do with them, and so on and so forth. You don't realize without the prototype. And sometimes I get of course, the translation a year later, and it's published already. Then I hope I get a copy of the English version of the game, and then I can do the same. But it's great to have the components really there to play the game, of course, with myself. But it's really like how to do the setup of the game. So often it's just not explained what is really where, but it's really complicated. I mean, game rules are really it's a bastard of text. It's a text. Everybody wants to have understood everything, but won't read it.
Right.
So they don't want to listen, they don't want to read, but they want to understand everything. So it's really
And
kind of
for all
text that
those-
You
For
can
all
use
those
rules
people-
nowadays. What we did with the Kickstarter campaign for Snowdonia was deliberately put errors in the rule book and on the cards, just to see if people would notice. And as
Right.
a criminal exercise in marketing the Isle of Man scenario.
Yeah, it works.
It was a masterstroke, actually. I'm glad that Alan had the idea in the first place to do it. But actually, it meant that we made far more money out of that entire enterprise than we would have done had we not deliberately put the errors into the rule book and on the cards. So
And
you can get quite meta with this rule situation.
exactly. It's just thinking. You said you were terrible at marketing. So for all of these people who scoff and say, "Oh my God, I can't believe that I opened the rule book and the first thing it says is put the board in the center of the table. What was I going to do? Put it down my trousers or something?" This, you would say, as a
Don't
rule
knock it,
writer,
tried it, Ben.
as a rule writer, this stuff is necessary, right? You
Right.
think this stuff is vital
Well,
to the
it's-
play
it's-
experience.
Yeah.
The thing is, you can say put the board, of course you have all the components, you open the box. So if the setup does not say put the board on the center of the table, then people won't do it. So so they put up all the other components and they wonder, okay, where's the board now? And if you say, you can say you put it on the table, but if you say, just put the board on the table, there are people who put it not in the middle, but somewhere where space. They put it aside or whatever. In the middle of the table is not each and every board is put in the middle of the table. Not necessarily so. Maybe there are piles of cards or something, so the board is actually at the side. You don't know. So it's better to use this sentence to make clear, okay, the center of the game somehow is the board and it's in the middle of the table, centrally placed. So it's not a problem.
So if
people
you
can
go
laugh
back-
about it, but if you don't do it, you have a problem.
So if you go back to those days when you were given your big break into the glamorous world of board games through Surprise Stare Games, and you were translating those early games, what was the state of those rules when you received them? Were they well written? Were they understandable, or were they a complete disaster?
Alan and Charlie, can you just turn off everything?
Yeah.
Can you leave? No. No, actually, no. It was all crystal clear. I guess from Totemo, I had a kind of prototype. No, I built it by myself. I don't know. I had something to play around with. I remember that. I don't know. Maybe they sent me some files and I made some cubes by myself. I don't know. Yeah, I remember to have to really played it in a prototype state. I don't know. Or you sent me one. I don't know.
I can't remember.
Maybe you sent me one to Germany. I don't know.
I may have
Okay,
done.
but
I only had
it was
one.
really it was great. And with Fzt, they sent me the files, and I printed the cards by myself and sleeved them. So they were pretty easy. And it was no, they were quite well. They were written. I had questions, of course, just to clarify something or whatever. But it was especially because they are for this level of they are not what's the English name for a big publisher. They don't have one editor but a whole group of editors. So they have development staff. They are really there are many people working on it. So if I get rules from them, I have to expect some really developed thing. If Alan sends me rules from Tony, well, I know there are not too many people involved yet, but of course they were. I mean, you had this thank the Hamel Hempstead guys or whatever. So there are a lot of playtesting stuff, and so these rules are really great. But well, they are both bright people. All three of them are really bright people.
I'm yet to see evidence, but I'll take your word.
I think
they are
also good at-
they are technically thinking and so on. They are really people who are really into this kind of work, and not the worst game rules are from really creative guys, you know, some artists who say, "Wow, we make the rules very funny." And I say, "Well, yeah, really funny, but I don't know what to do." So
We learned that lesson with Copperswaddle. I don't think we did that.
Yeah, we tried to be clever with that. I think the thing is, though, we learned lessons every time we came across something that would have brought us down. We learned the lesson for the next time round. So whether it was the importance of playtesting the artwork of a board, for instance, which is something that became very important to us. These are hard. People don't tell you these things, you know, really, and they seem so obvious. But now, blind testing rule books is what people do now, and blind testing components is what people do. But they didn't do it 20 years ago. They kind of assumed that if it's a game about trains and you like games with trains in it, that you'd buy it and you would suffer bad rules and bad presentation. Right. But I think a surprise for games, we have been very good at taking on board criticism and observations and input from people like Daniel, and then listening to it and then applying it then on every step of everything else that we've done. I think that's important.
I mean, looking back at my earlier work in the 80s and working with companies like Standard Games and Publications, I don't think they'd heard of the word blind playtesting. No. At all. And in fact, I don't think that. I think they would just accept whatever the designer put on paper and just publish it without really knowing what they were doing, to be honest. Yeah. And I mean, I'm not going to disparage it. I think it's of its era, and I'm working with Kingmaker at the moment, and the rules there are of their era, 1974. You only have to look at BGG, the Kingmaker listings. You can see there are well, we wouldn't ever even start from that position in the rule writing. And I remember the interesting thing about that one, though, just as a slight tangent, the original rules that Andrew McNeil wrote in 1974 were they were not like a modern set of rules, and then Avalon Hill took them a couple of years later for the American version, and they, quote, had some of their best developers on it, including kind of well-known people at that time. And you look at their rules and you think, I still don't understand what is going on here, because I subsequently heard that their rule writing method was basically to make sure that the game wasn't going to break. So they weren't interested necessarily in playability and making it smooth and easy to understand. They just wanted to make sure the game didn't break. Everything else is just flim-flam, really. So although I think some of the Avalon Hill game rules are quite good, some of them are sketchy and inconsistent in places. But that was of the era, I think, particularly in the wargaming world. People expected wargaming. The average wargamer at that period, the set of rules they've got would have lots of cutout bits pasted over and maybe the odd extra sheet in there which clarifies, that paragraph's not quite right and it's been amended to this. So it will be a kind of like a loose leaf clipping set, which would be the set of rules you're supposed to play the game from. And so that was that era. Nowadays that would be completely unacceptable. I mean, now even in war games you've got Osprey rules which are really great.
Yeah, this is the original rulebook for Scandaroon. I don't know if you can see. It's got lots of bits of paper that are stuck in to clarify the game itself. And extra supplementary Scandaroon rulebook stuff as well. These extra papers. This is the latest version. This is the most up to date. Let's get around to republishing Scandaroon actually.
Yeah.
When I got Copperswaddle, one of the early games of you, that was really hard for me to understand the English text, because as Charlie says, there are really special words, and then you did something, I guess so, that you really got into some pseudo-medieval extra wording. So you say, what? I don't know, as a German. And then there was a German translation by somebody on Board Game Geek. And it made something clearer, but not really. It was really, as Charlie says, it's really not. There are so many. Well, Tony is gone. Okay, I don't know why. He's back in the medieval times probably, and it was kind of. If you don't, that's what Tony says, that you learn to not use not use too special words, not to use these very specific, because you think, that's a great word for that. But if it's not common, people just have to look it up in dictionary, and then they say, okay, this kind of concept in German, it means 3 different things, but which one is meant here? It's really hard sometimes, and it's use simple words. And this is something that French people are also, I mean, if you look up Seasons, for instance, or other games, or Abyss is really notorious for that for each and every, it's not a draw pile, but I don't know, something special that you have to learn first, instead of saying, this is the draw pile, draw a card. No, it's the, I don't know, I just fantasize now. It's an expectation pile, and you have a dream. And to dream is that you pick up a card, and then throughout the rule it says player A now dreams, and you say what? And you say, you have to pick up a card. So to use this special wording because of the world of the game is settled or something. It's really annoying because it's so hard to. And if you explain the game, you tell everybody, this is a draw pile, pick up a card.
Yeah. I bought a simple trick-taking game.
Yeah,
and it was a very simple trick-taking game, and literally everything. Drawing a card was amassing your forces and all of this. And, and I read the rule book, the 3-page rule book. I read back and forth for about 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And I thought, I still don't know how to play this. Then I played the game and I went, it's a bloody trick-taking game. It's super easy. But everything had a different name. It was so frustrating.
Yeah, my particular pet noir is the artwork on games, though. When I get a lot of designers together and we're doing all play testing and stuff, and they've got a hut on a board and a hut on the card, and they don't mean the same thing. And they've got orange is a meaningful thing, and there's 6 different shades of orange.
Yes.
Which orange is actually the meaningful thing in this situation, or is it supposed to be something else? And they've also got reds and yellows. Which one's the orange? And those kinds of things. It's so important, not just to get the words right, but to actually make the information in the images useful and right and meaningful, and it's all part of how the game is learned and read and explained. Is a lot of it's actually in the images as well as the words. And a lot of designers will say to me when we're doing designing, and I'll say, look, your oranges are 3 different shades of orange, and this hut means something different to that hut. And what did that arrow over there mean anyway? Did it mean go this way or that way? Because you haven't pointed it in the right direction. And they'll say, oh, well, yes, somehow soon the artist will deal with that when they get to it. It's not part of the game. And I'll say, no, you can't actually play the game without that kind of stuff being right. Even on a prototype copy, you have to have.
Yeah. I'm guilty of that occasionally.
Yeah.
Because I'm not a visual. I'm not a visual person. But I try to be more visual because of.
Well, I did the artwork side of things.
Insistence from Charlie. So basically, I'll ask Charlie to do the artwork, which is fun. That's the easiest method.
What I like is when you have this fantasy world and you have a lot of Chrome text and story behind and so on. If you just separate it from the actual rules.
Yes, sure.
So it really says, okay, now we're in this fantasy world and this means this, and the draw pile is kind of saying that, but then you say, okay, and you separate the text, in a format or whatever, that people who say, okay, there's a lot of Chrome, I don't want that, I just want to see what the game is, how it works. Then you have this more, text boxes or whatever that says the actual rules are in these boxes, and the rest is, kind that you really have clear your mind to see what's going on. You say, okay, we only need the rules, or we read everything for just to know a little bit more about background or whatever. If you don't separate it and it's all somehow mixed up, then you have to read everything, and the rules are hidden somewhere in the text. And
Italics
I think it's similar to usability on websites. If you have a website and you're confused because there's something to click here, something going on there, but you don't know what to do and so on. If it's it's similar to this. It's really a technical text how to use things, and it's
Sure.
and it should be like it.
I don't want the instruction manual for my toaster telling me jokes
Yeah.
about 15th century toast. I don't. Right? So Daniel, when you think, so you're someone who's, you're in a privileged position in that you're sort of intimately acquainted with Surprise Stare, but you're kind of also on the outside, so you can have an objective view. When you think about Surprise Stare as a company, when you think about their games and the character of what they produce, what would you say Surprise Stare is as a game? And what is Alan's authorial voice? What is Tony's authorial voice? What is Charlie's contribution, her art style? What is Surprise Stare Games?
This is now, that's
just a little question.
Yeah, a very short one. Yeah,
nice small.
I have no idea. No, it's really kind of what I see is that they're really developing and evolving and getting more and more professional, more and more, as you see a difference from games from 2008 or now. That's really something, but it's really hard. What I like is that they are kind of, I think they're not that much mainstream, streamlined, everyday games you can get from any other huge publisher. They have this special, I don't know,
quirkiness,
appearance of kind of how not to be now use a word you are angry. No, I don't mean homemade, but I mean, you see that there are people who are doing this and not this kind of illustrations you see everywhere, but they are kind of special. And I really like that. A game like Copper Twaddle, one of my favorite two-player games, I guess. Nobody would publish it in that way. Nobody would. No huge publishing company would say, yeah, we do it just like this. They would say, no, we have to streamline, we have to make it more accessible, more, more mainstream. And they are not, it does not mean that they are more complicated or something, but they just have this special feeling of a Surprise Stare game, but I don't know what it is. I mean, they are so different. I mean, what has Snowdonia to do with Totemor or whatever? I don't know. But it is kind of homebrewed, or well, I'd say it's kind of, it's like you have a beer from your local brewer,
Does it feel?
It just had this tasting. Say, yeah, it's from people and not.
Is there an authenticity that you don't get with a big company whose singular goal is making as much money off this particular thing as quickly as possible?
Right.
No.
Yeah. It's this. No, it's why I work with Gen X games from Madrid, or these Lemon Brothers, the Frago games with these miniatures and this crazy. They are so not streamlined. These games are so not streamlined. They say we make 1,000 copies. It's more or less our prototype, and we try to sell them on to other publishers. But they are really so crazy games, and even I love to play them. I love. It's my special kind of game. I like too. I don't like games that are too streamlined. I just don't like them. I have my game, not collection, but allocation of games. I have 400 games or so, not that many, and they are all unique. They are really special. I have these Ludonaut games, Terrain Vague or something, that are so not streamlined. They are so crazy. They are so special, and each game is different. And I like when they have a personality. And they're really identifiable as, this game is so different from all other games I have. I don't buy any mainstream games. I don't need to. They're all, You know, this point salad German style game. I don't like it all anyway, but I don't need the 700th worker placement installment of some. I don't know, where's the difference. I don't know. It all looks the same. There are 3 or 4 illustrators. They do all these games. They look the same to me. I cannot distinguish them. I don't know. I don't care. But if I take a copper twaddle or I take, Confucius on the table, it's kind of different. It's really different. I mean, I needed 1.5 years to make my own copy of Confucius, remember? Because I thought, no, it deserves better. And then I made up a huge wooden board with a original old Chinese map and everything, and I made up my mind how to make this just special, because I like the game that much. And so it gets even more personality because it was unique. But I don't know, I like to, because if you play a game, there's a designer behind it, and there's a person, and you see some of his mind there. And if it's too streamlined, it's just a game like many others.
Excellent.
And that's why I did my own game, and I've published it by myself. I had the illustrator living next door, and a comic book comic book artist, and he really remade the game as we wanted it, and we decided everything.
I think that's what we have always really tried to do. Isn't that right, Tony?
Yeah. It's that's the whole surprise bit, really. Is if we did a railway game, we wanted to do a railway game that was slightly different. Yeah. If we did a sort of a historical game, we wanted to be something different. I mean, Gugong was a couple of years ago was made hugely the fact that there was some kind of element of gift giving in the game. But Alan did that 10 years before, in Confucius, and no one's done it quite the same way, and no one's done it here as well. Confucius game do incredibly well nowadays. If Alexander Pfister released Confucius with his name on the box, people would be buying tens of thousands of copies of it. It is that good a game, but unfortunately, and you'll find out over the weekend, nice one, it wasn't given the launch that it deserved. And I seriously think that there is scope for a new version of Confucius, and I think it deserves its place as one of the best medium to heavy Euro games that's been developed.
Excellent. And with that plug, we'll go to the audience. Do we have any questions for Charlie, for Alan, for Tony, or for Daniel? Don't ask me. I don't know anything. Anybody?
Is there anybody?
Anybody?
I cannot see. I cannot see if there are anybody.
No, nor me.
There are some people out there. We have an audience.
Why is Ben there?
There's a private chat and there are comments. There are comments.
I didn't click on
I
comments,
see the
that's
comment
why.
section now. A lot of comments. Okay.
Ben is there because he's the glue.
I am here because I give some much needed class to this proceeding. You don't want to just look at this riffraff. You want a bit of
he is
beauty.
Taking the Cornish pasty. That's what he is.
Oh, favorite drink.
Drink.
My favorite drink. Well, it depends. Favorite drink from Bez. I guess I like my Glenfiddich or whatever single malt whiskey.
Very good.
That's
and
which part of Germany are you based in, Daniel?
Stuttgart, which is in the southwest.
Yeah.
I live here for over 30 years, but I'm not born here. I grew up at Göttingen, where the game designer meeting is all the time. Who is everyone's favorite German resident British actor? Who creates what?
Yeah, who's
That's Slicker Drips, isn't it?
He's not German based. What's wrong with you?
It's him
British
over there. It's him over there.
Herr Slicker Drips.
Anyway, thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Rob. At least someone appreciates me, Rob.
Oh, we've got a serious question, I think. Ooh.
Do you still go to Nuremberg with SSG?
Well, we haven't been for a while. We have been since the ice storm a couple of times.
Last time you went was with Vicky, wasn't it?
Yes, but I haven't been for a while. I think part of the reason that I haven't been is that I've been focusing much more on production side of things, and we've kind of always seen Nuremberg as a way of going around and trying to get publishers to look at our stuff. And if we're publishing them ourselves and we've already got links with people like Frosty Games and Two Tomatoes and Lookout Games, there's less incentive for us to go to Nuremberg. It's quite expensive from our point of view as a company to do that. So we haven't been, I think last time it was 2015, something like that. Something like that. Anyway. So I haven't been for a while. That's my answer.
That's a good question.
Well, I am at Nuremberg all the time, of course. I'm at Nuremberg each year to contact people for translation stuff and so on, or for my own games. Not that many anymore, but yeah, it's great to meet people, and it's more, because it's only for professionals. It's not that massive people there, but you just meet the professional guys, which is great. Are you serious people? No, I am not. I'm never serious.
No,
who's serious here?
I am. I'm a very serious human being.
Oh, is that right?
He's trolling us.
Look at this face.
Well, my trouble is I have to do all the finances and all the bookkeeping and all the organisation of Spice Games.
We need one serious person.
I have to have a little bit of seriousness, or all that will fall apart. Yeah, so I'm serious. I'm serious, so that Tony doesn't have to be. How about that?
I couldn't be serious if I tried.
Oh, there's another question I see here. Yeah, if you had been.
Oh, right.
I guess
if you had designed games, what would you have done instead? Is the question.
Yeah, I mean, as I think I said yesterday, I started by doing some short stories, some science fiction short stories, and I decided that designing games is probably a better route. So I might have tried that, which would have been probably a disaster because I don't think I'm a very good creative writer. Although technically I have written a book, I just don't tell anybody about it. So that's what I'm doing.
I don't know. I guess
It's called 50 Shades of Ginger.
My answer's the other way around. Mostly I've done the other things instead, but I did do a bit of freeform writing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
the thing is that not too many people do the board game design as a full-time job and live from that.
Oh, no.
I mean, there are not too many. Even in Germany, it's about 20 people. It's because you do it as a side job. Stefan Feld is a teacher.
Yeah.
Yes.
Bruno Faiduti is a professor at the university, a history guy. So they all have their jobs. They just do it additionally. So the question is kind of, I mean, we all do different things, and I do film work with young people and stuff. So to earn, to have enough money for the rent. I mean, I earn some money on the translation stuff, and not with the few games I publish. So
I don't design games, but if I was trying to fund my life with my podcast, I would be very, very homeless indeed.
I mean, I always used to say back when I was doing this in the 80s, I think the illustrators got more money than I did as the designer. Because the illustrators are usually on a nice flat fee, fairly high rate, which is linked to how much actual work they put in. Whereas designers are on a small royalty on the basis of projected sales. And if you've got a game which doesn't sell tens of thousands of copies, you've not got anything. It could be a successful game in that sense, but you haven't got much of an income from it.
So one last question.
Tony has enough money now with Snowdonia and all this success, so he bought some games. All he've earned with Snowdonia, you see in the back, all which is bought there in his picture, that is everything he could buy from the successful Snowdonia, not more. That's all. No, this is from this is a shelf he bought from the expansions of Snowdonia.
Yeah, I can buying this kind of stuff, you see. Super old, rare stuff. I'm going to open a museum one day.
There's another question. What's your
Yeah.
favorite?
So one last question before we go. So from the translator and the designers, what are your favorite rule books?
My favorite rule book is the one for Dungeon Lords. It's fantastic. It's funny. It's a wonderful game. Dungeon Lords.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's a really hard one.
Yeah, what I liked with
I know. Dice Hospital.
What?
Dice Hospital, which is one of Alicat games. The rule book is so good that I was at a con and I was asked to teach the game to 4 people, and I'd never seen the game before. And I opened the rule book and I scanned the rule book and I taught the game straight from the rule book. And that I've never done that before. That is a really classy rule book to be able to do that. So kudos to Alicat Games. That was fabulous. And the game's great as well, but I mean the rule book is fabulous.
What I really like is games that are doing some if they are a bit more complicated, they do kind of easy rule to get into and then getting more complicated. Like Space Alert does that. Space Alert is also this great thing where it really tells a story, but it really gets you into the situation, into the game. And it says, yeah, we test this out, now do this and this. And afterwards you come back and now it's getting serious and so on. So you really get into the game. These are all great. The Czech games are really doing great stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Fog of Love does this too, which is a 2-player game where we play a relationship. It's just last year, which is really, you only have 2 pages and the rest you have a tutorial in some cards, and you always pick up the card, tells you what to do next, and then you play a tutorial, and all these cards lead you through your first game. And so you don't need to read the other 10 pages. It gets you into the game by playing it. And the cards are all ordered in the piles that you really play it on the fly, and you learn the rules by this, and the rules are on the card then. And it was really done in a good way too. I like stuff like that.
Excellent. Well, it seems that we've been doing this for 2 hours now, which is incredible. And it's the middle of the night here in Germany, and I haven't eaten dinner. So I'd like to thank Alan and Charlie. I'd like to thank young Tony Boydell and Daniel, all the way from Stuttgart. Home
Here's
of Mercedes.
Weird, isn't it?
Thank you very much. And
it is really great.
And I'll see you all tomorrow.
Yeah, see you tomorrow. Cheers.
Thank you for inviting me. And we see each other Sunday evening, right?
Yes.
Bye-bye. See you guys.